There is a world hidden behind this one, a realm Ibn Arabi called the Imaginal World. Not a dream, not imagination, but a living dimension between the soul and the unseen. Most people only touch it while sleeping, but certain souls begin entering it while fully awake, through silence, deep remembrance, and the loosening of the material self. The veil starts becoming thin. Strange signs appear. Time feels different. Symbols begin speaking, and the heart starts seeing what the eyes cannot. Tonight, we uncover Ibn Arabi's hidden method to access the imaginal realm while awake, and why this path changes a soul forever. Why certain souls begin feeling out of reality before awakening. The inner path that Ibn Arabi alludes to in subtle language, where the world does not change outwardly, but the soul begins to withdraw its certainty from it. Nothing dramatic happens at first. Life continues in its usual form. People speak, time moves, days pass as before. Yet inside the seeker, something begins to loosen, not the body, but the sense of being fully attached to what is seen. This feeling is not confusion in the ordinary sense. It is not a weakness of mind, nor escape from life. It is a quiet displacement of certainty. The soul begins to notice that everything it once considered solid carries a strange softness within it. Conversations feel slightly distant, as if they are happening behind a thin veil. Familiar places remain the same, but their weight changes. They no longer feel fully complete on their own. Ibn Arabi describes reality as layered, not flat. What the senses capture is only the surface of a much deeper unfolding. When a soul is being prepared for deeper perception, it is not taken out of the world instead. Its attachment to the surface of the world is reduced. This creates a strange experience. The person is present in life, but no longer fully convinced by its outward appearance alone. Even silence begins to feel different. Not empty, but charged, as if something is happening underneath it that cannot be named. The mind may try to explain this as overthinking or fatigue, but the experience persists beyond explanation. It returns in quiet moments, especially when external noise fades. The seeker starts noticing gaps between thoughts, gaps between meanings, gaps between what is said and what is actually felt. This is where the first distance appears. Not a distance from life itself, but from the illusion that life is only what is immediately visible. Ibn Arabi would call this a thinning of the veil, not its removal. The veil does not break suddenly, it becomes less dense. And because of that, perception becomes unstable in its old form. The person may begin to feel as though they are watching themselves move through routines, not in a dramatic or disconnected way, but in a subtle awareness that something deeper is observing everything. Even emotions begin to shift. Joy feels lighter, sadness feels deeper, but neither fully defines the self anymore. There is something inside that is no longer fully absorbed by them. This is often misunderstood by the mind as detachment or emotional distance. But in the language of inner realization, it is actually the beginning of realignment. The soul is no longer fully confined to the outer layer of experience. It begins to sense that meaning is not only carried by events, but by something hidden within them. Ibn Arabi would point toward this stage as the early sign of inward opening, not because new things are added, but because old certainty is removed. What once felt absolute becomes relative. What once felt fixed becomes fluid. And in that fluidity, a different kind of awareness begins to form. So when a soul begins to feel out of reality, it is not leaving reality. It is being trained to see that reality was never only one layer. It is being prepared for perception that does not stop at appearance. And this preparation always begins with a quiet shift where the world remains the same, but the certainty of it no longer does. The forgotten state between sleep and wakefulness. There is a narrow passage in human awareness that most people pass through every single day, yet almost no one truly notices it. It is the moment between sleep and full waking, not the dream itself, and not the waking world either. Ibn Arabi hints towards states like this when he speaks about the soul moving through levels of perception that are not bound to ordinary time or physical clarity. This is not a place the body enters, but a condition in which consciousness is still soft, unshaped, and open before it settles into the structure of the day. In that brief interval, the soul has not yet fully agreed to the rules of the waking world. Thought has not yet become solid. Identity has not fully reassembled itself. The mind is present, but it is not yet dominant. What remains is a kind of openness, a fragile transparency in awareness, where images, meanings, and impressions can arise without the usual interference of interpretation. Most people forget this state instantly because waking life rushes in like a wave. Responsibilities, thoughts, and physical awareness reclaim control. But Ibn Arabi would suggest that what is forgotten is often what is most revealing. In this in-between condition, perception is not yet narrowed. It is still wide enough to receive impressions that do not belong to ordinary sensory logic. It is here that subtle signs sometimes pass through. Not full visions, not clear dreams, but fragments, feelings of presence, symbolic flashes, or a sense that something meaningful was just experienced without words. The mind cannot hold it, because the mind has not yet fully formed at that moment. So it slips away, not because it was unreal, but because it belonged to a different mode of awareness. The seeker on the inner path begins to notice that this state is not only something that happens in sleep cycles. It becomes recognizable in meditation, in deep silence, and even in moments of still attention during the day. It is the same threshold, appearing in different forms, a soft boundary where the self is not fully fixed in its usual identity. Ibn Arabi's language about such thresholds suggests that existence is not divided only into awake and asleep, but contains hidden gradations of awareness between them. In this forgotten state, the soul is closer to its origin of perception before it is narrowed into interpretation, language, and worldly certainty. What makes this state important is not what is seen in it, but what becomes possible through it. In ordinary waking, everything is filtered immediately through logic and habit. But in this in-between space, reality is not yet fully filtered. It appears in a more raw and symbolic form. This is why impressions felt here often carry a strange depth, even if they cannot be explained later. The reason it is forgotten is not because it is insignificant, but because the waking self is designed to prioritize survival, structure, and action. It closes the door quickly so life can function, yet for those whose perception begins to soften, this doorway does not close as completely as before. A faint awareness begins to remain, even after waking a trace of that undefined openness. This state becomes a silent teacher. It shows that consciousness is not fixed in one mode. It moves, it shifts, it passes through layers that are usually unseen. Ibn Arabi would point toward this as one of the subtle signs that perception is being trained beyond ordinary limits, where even the boundary between sleep and waking is no longer just a line, but a living threshold the soul can learn to recognize. Why the imaginal realm speaks through symbols instead of words. In the understanding attributed to Ibn Arabi, the imaginal realm is not a place where meaning is spoken directly in the way human beings speak. It is a domain where reality reveals itself through form, image, and symbol, because that is the only language the soul can receive when it is not bound by physical speech. Words belong to the material world. They are linear, fixed, and dependent on time. But the imaginal realm moves in a different structure, where meaning is not carried by sound, but by appearance and inner recognition. When a soul begins to approach this level of perception, it notices that direct explanation no longer feels sufficient. Instead, experiences begin to arrive in symbolic form, scenes, patterns, encounters, or sudden impressions that carry a depth far greater than their surface meaning. A single image can hold layers of understanding that would normally require many sentences to explain. This is not because the message is unclear, but because it is too vast to be reduced into ordinary language. Ibn Arabi often points toward the idea that reality itself is layered with signs. What we call symbols are not invented by the mind alone. They are reflections of deeper meanings taking shape in visible form. In the imaginal realm, meaning does not hide behind form, it appears through form. A symbol is not a disguise. It is a direct expression of something that cannot be carried by words without losing its depth. This is why the seeker may begin to experience life differently. Ordinary events start to feel as if they are carrying hidden references. A repeated encounter, a specific phrase heard unexpectedly, or even a pattern seen in daily life can feel charged with significance. The mind may try to dismiss it as coincidence, but something deeper recognizes that repetition is not random when perception begins to shift. In this realm of understanding, symbols function as a bridge. They allow meaning to pass from the unseen layers of reality into human awareness without being reduced or broken. If meaning were delivered in direct verbal form, it would lose its multi-layered nature. But when it arrives as a symbol, it remains open. It does not close into a single definition. It invites contemplation instead of conclusion. The reason words are insufficient here is not because they are weak, but because they belong to a different order of reality. Words demand agreement on meaning. Symbols do not. A symbol can hold multiple truths at once, each one revealing itself depending on the depth of the observer. This is why two people can see the same sign and receive entirely different understandings, not because the sign changes, but because perception changes. Ibn Arabi's perspective suggests that the imaginal realm is closer to the root of meaning itself. Before meaning becomes speech, it exists as form, and before form is interpreted, it carries a direct presence that speaks to the inner faculty of recognition. This is why symbols feel alive to the one whose perception is awakening. They are not decoded like puzzles. They are experienced like mirrors reflecting inward states. As the soul continues to soften its attachment to purely literal thinking, it begins to understand without needing full explanation. Meaning becomes immediate, but not verbal. It is felt rather than translated. And in this shift, symbols become the natural language of perception, not because reality has become mysterious, but because it is being seen in a way that is closer to how it actually unfolds. So the imaginal realm speaks in symbols because symbols preserve depth. They do not reduce reality into one meaning. They allow it to remain alive, layered, and unfolding. And for the seeker, learning to see symbolically is not about decoding a hidden code, but about learning to perceive without limiting what is being seen. The inner shift that changes how reality feels. There is a subtle turning point in the inner life of a seeker where nothing around them appears to have changed, yet everything begins to feel different. Ibn Arabi points toward such transformations not as external events, but as movements within perception itself. This shift does not alter the structure of the world. It alters the way the soul receives it. And because of that, reality no longer feels fixed in the same way it once did. At first, life continued in its usual pattern. The same places are seen, the same voices are heard, the same responsibilities unfold. But beneath this continuity, something quiet begins to reorganize within awareness. The mind is no longer fully convinced that what it sees is complete in itself. There is a growing sense that every moment carries more than what is immediately visible, as if each experience has an unseen depth pressing gently from behind it. This is not imagination replacing reality. It is perception widening beyond its former limit. Ibn Arabi would describe such a condition as the soft unfolding of inward vision, where the soul begins to sense layers beneath appearances. What once felt solid and self-contained now feels open-ended, as though every moment is pointing beyond itself. Because of this, the texture of everyday life begins to change. Time does not feel as rigid. Some moments feel heavier, as if they contain more meaning than others. Other moments feel strangely light, as if they are passing through without leaving the same imprint. The uniformity of experience breaks, not in chaos, but in depth. Life becomes uneven in meaning, even though it remains structurally the same. The seeker may notice that emotional responses also begin to shift. Things that once created strong reactions no longer carry the same weight, not because the heart has become cold, but because it is no longer fully identified with surface-level impressions. There is a space forming between the experience and the observer of the experience. In that space, reality feels less like something happening to the person and more like something being witnessed through them. Ibn Arabi's understanding of perception suggests that what changes is not the world, but the degree of attachment the soul has to its immediate interpretation of the world. When that attachment weakens, perception becomes more fluid. And in that fluidity, reality is no longer experienced as a fixed narrative, but as something unfolding moment by moment, carrying meanings that cannot be fully captured at once. This shift also affects how certainty itself is felt. The mind becomes less quick to finalize meaning. It begins to sense that what is seen is only one layer among many possible layers. As a result, life feels less like a closed explanation and more like an open disclosure. Events are no longer just events. They become indications of something deeper, trying to be understood through experience. Even ordinary silence begins to feel different. It is no longer empty or neutral. It feels full, but without form, as if something is present that cannot yet be translated into thought. This changes how solitude is experienced. Being alone no longer feels like absence, but like exposure to something subtle that was always there but previously unnoticed. Reality itself has not become mystical in an external sense. It has become transparent. The surface has not disappeared, but it is no longer opaque. Through it, something deeper is quietly visible. Ibn Arabi would describe this not as entering another world, but as seeing this world without the same level of veiling. And so the inner shift is not dramatic. It does not announce itself loudly. It is a quiet reordering of perception, where meaning expands, certainty loosens, and reality begins to feel less like a fixed structure and more like a living disclosure unfolding in layers. The secret discipline that expands inner vision. In the language of Ibn Arabi, expansion of inner vision is never the result of force or effort in the ordinary sense. It is not something achieved by pushing the mind to see more, nor by collecting experiences or knowledge. Instead, it is the outcome of refinement, a gradual removal of noise that prevents perception from becoming clear. What is called discipline here is not rigid control, but a steady return of awareness to a quieter, more receptive state. At the beginning of this path, the seeker notices that the mind is constantly active, even when nothing is happening externally. Thoughts continue to shape reality inwardly, adding interpretation upon interpretation. This constant movement creates a layer that sits between the soul and direct perception. Ibn Arabi would describe this layer not as evil or unnecessary, but as dense, something that must soften if deeper vision is to appear. The first discipline, therefore, is not addition but reduction, not accumulating more practices, but removing what disturbs, stillness. Silence becomes central here, not as absence of sound, but as the withdrawal of unnecessary inner commentary. When the inner speech begins to slow, perception starts to widen naturally. Reality no longer has to pass through constant explanation before it is experienced. Another aspect of this discipline is attention. Not scattered attention that jumps from one thing to another, but sustained witnessing. The seeker begins to observe thoughts, emotions, and sensations without immediately turning them into stories. This simple shift creates space within awareness, and in that space, perception becomes less compressed. Ibn Arabi would say that when awareness stops rushing to define, it begins to receive. Alongside this comes the discipline of detachment from constant stimulation. The outer world continuously demands attention through noise, images, and distractions. But inner vision grows in the absence of overload. When the senses are not constantly occupied, their sensitivity deepens. The world does not become less real. It becomes more detailed, more layered, and less flattened by distraction. There is also a subtler form of discipline that is not often spoken of, the discipline of not finalizing meaning too quickly. The mind has a habit of closing understanding as soon as something appears. But in Ibn Arabi's perspective, reality is never fully closed. It is always unfolding. When the seeker learns to hold experiences without immediately labeling them, perception begins to stretch. Meaning starts to reveal itself gradually, rather than being forced into immediate conclusions. Remembrance plays a quiet but central role. Not mechanical repetition, but conscious return. A return of awareness to presence, again and again, whenever it drifts into dispersion. This repeated return is what stabilizes inner vision. It is not the repetition itself that creates depth, but the consistency of coming back to clarity after dispersion. Something subtle begins to happen. The boundary between inner and outer perception becomes less rigid. The seeker starts to notice meaning not only in extraordinary moments, but within ordinary ones. A glance, a pause, a sound, or even silence begins to carry a different weight. Nothing external has changed, yet everything feels more speaking than before. Ibn Arabi would describe this not as gaining new sight, but as uncovering what was already present, but previously veiled by density of attention. Inner vision does not arrive from outside. It emerges when the veils within perception become thinner. And these veils are not removed through intensity, but through refinement, the quiet discipline of simplifying the inner world until it no longer blocks what is always being revealed. So this discipline is not dramatic. It is subtle, continuous, and almost invisible from the outside. Yet within the seeker, it gradually changes the quality of seeing itself. Reality is not replaced. It is seen with less obstruction. And in that clarity, perception begins to expand naturally, without effort, without strain, and without needing to force what is already waiting to be seen. When the soul begins receiving without the physical senses, in the path Ibn Arabi alludes to, there comes a stage where perception begins to shift away from dependence on the physical senses. This does not mean the senses stop working or become irrelevant. Rather, it means the soul begins to receive meaning in a way that is not limited to sight, sound, or touch. What was once only understood through the outer channels starts to arrive directly within awareness, without needing a physical form to carry it. This shift is subtle and easy to overlook. The seeker may notice moments where understanding appears suddenly, without logical reasoning. A clarity arises before thought can construct it. A sense of knowing appears without being taught. These moments do not come as ideas formed by analysis, but as direct impressions within the inner field of perception. Ibn Arabi would describe this as a type of reception that bypasses the usual route of sensory input and mental processing. As this condition deepens, the distinction between external experience and internal understanding begins to soften. The soul no longer depends entirely on what is seen or heard to form meaning. Instead, meaning begins to present itself inwardly, and the senses simply confirm what has already been perceived within. It is as if the outer world and inner awareness begin to align, rather than one creating the other. Silence becomes especially revealing, not silence as emptiness, but silence as fullness without form. In such moments, the seeker may receive insight without any external trigger. There is no question asked, yet understanding arrives. There is no visible message, yet something is clearly communicated within. Ibn Arabi's language points toward this as a mode of direct unveiling, where knowledge is not acquired step by step, but given all at once in subtle form. The physical senses continue to function, but they are no longer the sole authority. The eye sees, but perception is not confined to sight. The ear hears, but understanding is not limited to sound. Something deeper begins to interpret reality before the senses complete their work. This is not separation from the world, but a deeper engagement with it, one that includes layers the senses alone cannot reach. The seeker may also begin to notice that certain experiences carry an immediate inner recognition, even before they are fully understood externally. A situation may feel meaningful before its details are clear. A moment may feel significant without explanation. This is because reception is no longer delayed by analysis. It is immediate, subtle, and non-verbal. Ibn Arabi's perspective suggests that this form of perception is not supernatural in the way people often imagine. It is a return to a more original state of awareness, where the soul is not entirely dependent on physical mediation to receive meaning. The senses still provide data, but they are no longer the only doorway. Another layer of awareness begins to function alongside them, quietly integrating what is beyond their reach. In this condition, reality feels less like something being constructed through observation and more like something being disclosed directly to the inner being. The world does not become less physical, but it becomes more transparent. It begins to carry depth that is immediately felt, not just observed. Meaning arrives not after interpretation, but before it. This is why the experience can feel unfamiliar at first. The mind is used to trusting what is measurable, visible, and audible. But here, certainty begins to arise without measurement. Understanding appears without visible cause. And awareness begins to extend beyond the limits of sensory confirmation. Ibn Arabi would indicate that this is not a loss of the senses, but a widening of perception beyond their boundary. The soul is not abandoning the physical world. It is learning to receive from both the seen and the unseen simultaneously. And in this expanded condition, reality is no longer reduced to what the senses alone can carry, but becomes a continuous unfolding of meaning that reaches directly into the depth of awareness. Why most people touch the imaginal realm, but forget it immediately? There is a subtle truth in the inner teachings attributed to Ibn Arabi. The imaginal realm is not far from human awareness, and in fact, many people come into contact with it without realizing it. But what is touched in that moment is not always held. It appears briefly, then slips away, as the waking mind reasserts its usual structure. The experience is not lost because it was unreal, but because the instrument of perception is not yet stable enough to retain it. When a person moves between sleep and waking, or falls into deep stillness without awareness, the boundaries of ordinary perception soften. In that softness, impressions from the imaginal realm can pass through. They may appear as symbolic dreams, sudden inner visions, or strange feelings of meaning that cannot be fully explained. But the moment full waking consciousness returns, the mind immediately begins translating everything into familiar categories. And in that translation, something essential is reduced. Ibn Arabi would point toward the idea that the human mind is structured to stabilize experience. It organizes reality so that life can function in a predictable way. This is necessary for survival, but it also creates a limitation. Anything that does not fit into its usual framework is either simplified or forgotten. So when the imaginal realm touches awareness, it often does not survive this process of mental restructuring. Another reason for this forgetting is speed. The imaginal realm does not unfold in the same linear sequence as ordinary thought. It is layered, simultaneous, and symbolic. But the waking mind moves quickly from impression to interpretation to conclusion. In that movement, the depth of the original experience is left behind. What remains is only a fragment, a feeling, a vague memory, or a partial image without its inner meaning. There is also a deeper reason described in the language of inner realization. Attention itself is divided. Most people do not remain fully present at the moment of transition. The awareness that receives the experience is not fully stabilized. It is still shifting between inner openness and outer engagement. Because of this instability, what is received cannot be held long enough to integrate. Ibn Arabi's perspective suggests that the imaginal realm is not a distant place that must be reached, but a level of perception that requires a certain quality of presence to remain accessible. When that presence is strong, experiences from this realm are not just glimpsed, they are retained, reflected upon, and understood. But when presence is weak or fragmented, the experience passes through like a reflection on water that is immediately disturbed. Another layer of this forgetting comes from attachment to certainty. The waking mind prefers what is clear, structured, and explainable. The imaginal realm, however, communicates through openness and ambiguity. It does not always provide direct answers. So when something is received that does not fit into certainty, the mind quietly dismisses it. Not because it is meaningless, but because it cannot be immediately categorized. In truth, what is forgotten is not erased. It remains in the deeper layers of awareness, but it is not carried into conscious memory. Sometimes it returns later in fragments through dreams, intuition, or sudden recognition, as if something familiar is trying to resurface. This suggests that the contact was real, but incomplete in its integration. Ibn Arabi would indicate that remembrance is not only about recalling information, but about stabilizing perception. When awareness becomes steadier, what was once forgotten begins to remain. The imaginal realm does not move away. Rather, the seeker becomes capable of holding its impressions without losing them in the rush of ordinary thought. So most people do not lose the imaginal realm because they are far from it. They lose it because they pass through it without full awareness. And anything passed through without presence becomes a memory that fades before it can become understanding. Perhaps the imaginal realm was never far away. Perhaps it has always been surrounding you, waiting for the moment your heart becomes quiet enough to notice it. Ibn Arabi taught that the unseen does not open through force, but through purification, presence, and remembrance. The deeper you detach from noise, the more reality begins revealing its hidden layers. And maybe the strange feelings, the silent awakenings, and the moments you could never explain were never random at all. They were signs that your soul was already standing near the veil.